السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, first and foremost, Jazakumullahu khairan for tuning in and to our wonderful guest this afternoon, or this evening, I should say. Alhamdulillah, another episode of the Nikah Masterclass where we meet at least once a month, inshallah, and we talk about the different topics related to marriage and what the community is going through. And today the topic is technology and marriage. And really, what impact has technology had on marriage? Not only has technology changed the way that we find our spouse, but technology is also creeping into our marriages and having a impact on our day-to-day lives, our intimacy, our communication, and many other aspects. But today we really want to talk about how technology is impacting the way that we find our spouses. And so we want to start the discussion, inshallah, by introducing our guests. And I'll start with, inshallah, our Sheikh, Jazakumullah khairan, for joining us today, Sheikh Ahmed Khater. If you can give us a little bit of a background, a little bit of an introduction before we dive into the topic, we really appreciate it. It's my first time meeting you, Sheikh. So would love to learn a little bit about your background.
Jazakumullah khairan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with all of you. I've been following some of the videos that you've been doing online. Mashallah, great work. Sheikh Joe is a close friend and mentor of mine, and seeing him work with you is really inspiring. And when I got the invite, I definitely wanted to join with him and with all of you. And also, Tamir, turns out we have the admin, turns out we have a connection through mutual. My friend, his brother-in-law, mashallah, so it was great to hear from him. And so thank you again for having me. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our gathering here today solely for his sake and a proof for us, not against us, on the day that we meet him. Allahumma ameen. Just quickly about myself. I'm your brother, Ahmed Khater. I was born and raised here in the Bay Area in California. I studied here at UC Berkeley, legal studies with a concentration on comparative Islamic law as well. And then I also studied at Al-Azhar University in Egypt, getting a degree there as well in Islamic sciences and Arabic language. And I also came back to Berkeley and did my MA and PhD at the Graduate Theological Union in Islamic law and legal theory. And I also studied privately, alhamdulillah, with the Mashayikh, and received teaching licenses or ijazat from them. And I'm now a professor here, assistant professor of Islamic studies with a focus on Islamic law and legal theory here at the GTU, and also an adjunct professor of Islamic studies at St. Mary's College here in Moraga. And I also work as a mufti with AMJA, one of their online muftis, and I'm also a consultant in one of their council consultants as well. So I deal with a lot of the fatwas we get on a daily basis regarding marriage and divorce and so on. And we actually had a whole conference in AMJA on this topic, on marriage law and technology and other related issues. So it was like contemporary legal issues associated with technology, and there was a section on family law as well. So we did research some of these things. And yeah, that's I live here in the Bay Area with family, 2 young daughters, alhamdulillah. And I think that's all you need to know.
MashaAllah, no, Jazakallah. I mean, honestly, whenever we have shuyukh like yourself who come, I just think about all of the time and effort and the studies that you've gone through years and years and years, and we can only take advantage of maybe 30, 40 minutes of your time, but subhanAllah, so much time and effort goes into presenting the gems, inshallah, that you'll be giving us today. So Jazakallah for your time, and we really are honored to be hosting you and for you to be our guest, so Jazakallah for that. And also we have our recurring guest, mashallah, brother Usman Mughni, who I've known for a long time, but maybe just as a reintroduction to the audience, if Usman, if you can give us a little bit of background of where you're coming from and how that relates to marriage.
Okay. So I am located in Dallas, Texas. I'm your brother Usman Mughni. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I've been working in the field for almost 13 years now, alhamdulillah. And I work a lot with premarital counseling. I do a lot of marriage counseling, and then I also diagnose and treat different mental health illnesses like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and I used to specialize in addiction, including pornography addiction. So just all advices that our community is facing. Alhamdulillah.
SubhanAllah, right on the money. Allahu Akbar. So, I want to frame the discussion by really talking about what impact has technology had specifically as it relates to how we are finding spouses. Right now, I'm actually going to ask you, Brother Usman, to kind of frame the discussion for us before we dive in and kind of narrow in on some of the issues. But, from your perspective, what have you seen as the impact of technology and the way that we find our spouses these days?
Right. So it's interesting. My my thesis in grad school actually was on mate selection, but this was done. So it was a cross-generational comparison between the way that young Muslims in America approached looking for a spouse and the whole methodology and the criteria, and compared it to their parents' generation. That was before all of these apps, and so. That was based on just meeting through friends or like Isna matrimonial and stuff like that. And I think that these apps generally have completely changed the playing field, in some good and some bad, right? Because I think I've said this in previous episodes as well, that as long as you are grounded in your moral stances and you know what you want and who you're going to be compatible with, and your principles Islamically, and you have a good support system, then I think it's okay to have good, strong criteria and cast a really wide net. And online platforms allow you to do that, right? Online platforms allow you to connect with people in Cali, in New York, and so on. And so if you have very specific, I want somebody who, really matches my family values and really matches, my level of deen, whatever, or economics or whatever it might be, you have a better chance now of finding that person because of a wider net, right? But then obviously on the flip side, then you encounter the whole thing of like too much choice, right? And then there's a fitna in that as well, where you overthink and then you become quote unquote too picky. And then there's also the room for, and I mean we've seen this even in our live streams where people come on the chat and just say horrible things, which Naveed, you're a big guy, nobody would say that to your face, right? So we have the whole idea of people being able to hide behind a screen and do horrible things and mess with girls, or sometimes girls messing with guys and not serious and so on. And so that's something that's a fitna that you wouldn't typically see in like large open matrimonial settings, or you wouldn't really get it with a recommendation from a friend or a family member.
Oh, subhanallah. And I also think about how we've kind of flipped the script when it comes to these marriage apps, right? And I think, as you kind of alluded to, is that one of the biggest changes in the way that we find spouses these days is that a lot of people primarily rely on these apps, right? And these apps are popping up left, right, and center. Some of them, they have a component of some degree of, it's hard to say, but let's say humility or some sense of haya, where it's not necessarily based off pictures. And then you have kind of the other apps where it's just like any other app, swipe right, swipe left, right? And it's kind of flipping the marriage process and how to figure out if you're compatible on its head. So, you're looking at a picture, swipe right, left, or there's some bio that's in front of you and you're deciding without even talking to the human being, just based off an avatar really, that this person is compatible or not. Do you think that way of finding our spouse has an impact on how strong our marriages can be, or any potential downfalls that you see with that?
So what I've seen is, and I've spoke about this I think as well in the past, I've seen more people spending too much time with the wrong person, right? And actually not getting married and falling into haram, or just unnecessarily extending a whole courtship process and then getting frustrated with that. I've seen that more than necessarily finding the wrong person, because I think that you can find the wrong person through any avenue. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
And Sheikh, before I ask you some specific questions, I mean, any comments, just generally, if you do, if not, that's fine as well. But any general comments or maybe insights into how this app is, or these apps are hindering, or maybe even making better, if somebody would argue that position, us being able to find spouses?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Well, I've actually seen both sides. I've seen positive usages of these apps and these sites. And I've seen people, close friends of mine, who actually found pious spouses, and those ended up in those searches ended up in successful marriages with, mashallah, religious children and good family. And so these apps and these sites, no doubt, are an outlet for those who, especially those who grew up in a family that think differently than them. So I have friends of mine who are actually, sheikhs and imams and students of knowledge. When they grew up originally in a family that was not religious. And so their connections, their circle was not a religious, circle. So when they're looking for whether family friends or events that their family takes them to, and they're looking for spouses, there was no one that was at the same level as them in terms of religion and thinking and ethics and morals. And so maybe their town where they grew up in, the Muslim families are limited. They couldn't find anyone. And then they found, they found an opportunity with the emergence of these type of sites. And I've seen, subhanAllah, it was like a breath of fresh air. It was hope for them, and that led them to very successful marriages. On the flip side, I've seen scams. I've had people who were scammed, who they ended up marrying someone, and they, as your spouse now, you're sending her money and so on. And after a long time, you realize that they stopped responding, and then you realize you were scammed. I've seen people who got married and it didn't work out very quickly. And so, I mean, I've seen, negative relationships that came out of this as well. And I've seen haram relationships come out of that as well, where, you meet someone online and that leads to haram. So, I mean, it's like, it's like with technology in general, whether it's with YouTube, for example, with TV, with your cell phone. We live in a time where you have so many blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you can find and use, using these technologies. With your phone, you can, every book pretty much, except those are still in manuscript form. Even those in manuscript form, they're photos of them too. But almost any book pretty much that you want to study, or any class that you want to take, you don't have to travel around the world anymore. With a click of a button, everything's recorded, whether on YouTube or an online institution. Same thing with marriage. You can now meet people around the world that would have been compatible with you that you would never have known otherwise. So you could use it for, the halal, and use it for the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on the flip side, double-edged sword, you could also use it for the haram. So it really goes back to your intention and how you want to use it.
I think that's a good point, right? When it comes to technology in general, and then even marriage apps or other things in specific, that it's a tool at the end of the day. And to paint with wide brushes to say that it's halal entirely or it's haram entirely, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a tool, and it's up to you to use it in the proper way. Is it? Would you say that's fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about specifics in a second, but the default is, if you use it in a proper manner, then alhamdulillah, like I said, it can lead to successful marriages that are built upon the foundation of which is worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and so on. And of course, it can be used in haram manner as well, definitely. Yeah.
And so, kind of getting into those issues, some issues that I can kind of think about just off the top of my head, and maybe we can go through them, piece by piece. But, one area of concern is the pictures, right? These apps are primarily, at least the vast majority of them, are picture centric, right? That the first thing that you see is a picture. And so there's issues with, seeing a lot of pictures. There may be issues of posting pictures. So what do we as users of this tool, what should we be cognizant of when it comes to at least the pictures aspect of these applications?
Well, this issue has to be addressed in more than one perspective. Obviously, if you take it back to the default, or the way back to the beginning, we would talk first about the ruling on picture making and photography and so on. But and then the issue on avatars and these apps that would change your image and things like that. There's a lot of issues related to the issue of posting pictures online, not just the immediate issue of posting and looking, but also the concept of creating avatars and creating pictures and taking pictures and adjusting using Photoshop. Is that permissible or not? But let's just start off with the concept of posting pictures online. And this is more relevant when it comes to women than men, for obvious reasons, is that the awrah of a woman is more extensive than the awrah of a man. And so, when a woman posts her picture online, she has to cover more. And the issue of women being protected from the eyes of men is emphasized concept in the Sharia. So I would say, speaking mostly about the issue of women, but also this applies to men and women, that both obviously should be careful about their pictures and display modesty and so on. But particularly when it comes to women, and that probably is what you're referring to, if I'm understanding correctly, the default, in my opinion, in terms of a woman posting pictures on social media, whether it's social media or marriage apps or marriage websites or whatever, online in general, is that it should not be done. You should be cautious of this. And the ruling would differ at times, sometimes being prohibited, at times it would not reach that level, but the default is that it should be avoided. And, obviously we have different scenarios. A woman who is not wearing hijab, or she's wearing not full hijab, it would not be permissible to post her picture, as, improper dress is obviously, not a good thing to do. It's an issue itself. And then let alone spreading that improper, dress amongst others and allowing them to see that. So that's another issue involved with that. That's scenario one, if she's not dressed properly in the first place. And obviously this is defined by Islamic, code of dress. If, however, the dress was proper, then we also have more than one scenario. Either this woman follows the opinion that her face must be covered, or she follows the opinion that it's not a requirement. If she follows the opinion that covering her face is merely recommended, then I would say she should still not do this, right? Even if she has proper hijab in general, but she doesn't cover her face, taking that position, it would still not be permissible, according to some scholars, for men to look at her, right? And she would thus be allowing people to see her. The scholars discuss the ruling of a man looking at a woman even without desire. And so some of them said that it's not permissible even without desire. So in that case, her exposing her face and allowing others to see her, she'd be aiding in that regard. Now, even according to the opinions that would allow her to expose her face and also do not prohibit looking at her without desire, the Sharia, if you look at the principles of the Sharia and the goals and the purposes behind legislation in the Sharia did not intend for women to post, their faces online or their bodies online, even in full dress, for countless men to see 24 hours a day. Yeah, the concept of posting online for everyone in the world is, to see, or there's access to anyone to see anytime, any place, especially with the possibility of many people out there being able to save the photo and share with others and so on. This does not fall in line with the purpose of the Sharia. So there's a difference between, that and between those who did allow her to expose her face for going out to the marketplace and buying and selling, or leaving her house to take care of her needs, or in the courtroom. The scholars, when they talked about showing the face of a woman when she's going out to take care of her needs, that is a completely different scenario than the concept of posting on social media for every person around the world to see 24 hours a day. This is way beyond past the issue of just taking care of her needs. And there's a need sometimes to know who you're dealing with. And so they allow, showing the face and so on. The Sharia encourages her, as a general concept in Islamic law, the Sharia encourages the Muslim woman to keep away from the eyes of men. And this is evident in many rulings concerning women. And so I believe that posting these type of pictures, public pictures, publicly, would go against, those purposes of the Sharia. And this is especially the case in times of fitna. Like, I don't know any other time where we live, where the fitna is higher than our time. We live in a super, hyper-sexualized society. And if this was not the time of fitna, where even the scholars who allowed exposing the face, even that opinion held by some scholars, even those scholars say, even though we would allow her generally, but in these type of times of fitna, she should cover her face, right? So even those scholars who allowed exposing the face said it should be covered in such times of fitna. Now, if the woman does follow the opinion where she covers her face and she then only exposes her eyes, then also there's a discussion amongst the scholars. Then also there would be a discussion regarding whether it'd be allowed to look at her or not, and would be allowed to look at her eyes or not. And again, the idea of still posting, her eyes and beautifying the eyes and posting it online and people looking at her and looking into her eyes and her features and so on, even if it's the outline of her face and looking at her eyebrows or her eyes and so on. Again, this would not be in line with the divine purposes of the Sharia. And if she covers her face entirely and doesn't even show her eyes, then again, there's no point in posting her picture online. So this is my personal opinion. There are other scholars, even amongst Amja, who say if she is properly dressed and she exposes her face, and she posts pictures online in a tasteful, proper, modest manner, then the issue goes back to the man to not look, and it's not on her. Again, I believe there's a distinction between taking care of her needs, whether it's at work or in the marketplace or in the courtroom or so on, where she needs to expose her face. There's difficulty not exposing her face if she takes that opinion. And the concept of just posting the picture for the whole world to see. Now, with that being said, would this then change if the intention to post the picture online is to see if a suitor may notice her or not? So would this then be allowed if the intention was to just introduce yourself online so that a suitor can notice her or see her? I would say this would still take the same ruling. So this would take the same ruling as showing your picture to all men online, as I mentioned already. And this would not fall under what we discussed regarding that there's certain times where you're allowed to expose due to a need. There is this concept of that, which we may talk about it later when we talk about, speaking online in chat rooms or whatever. But when the Sharia did not allow men to look at women generally, when the concept of lowering the gaze is legislated, this is because that could lead to the haram. When something could lead to fitna and lead to the haram, the Sharia comes and blocks the means. However, if there's a preponderant need and benefit that supersedes, right, the harm that it may lead to by looking, then the Sharia comes and then allows it. So I do not feel that this case would fall under that. If there was a particular suitor who wanted to see a photo, then I would say yes. So I would say this doesn't fall under the concept of we have a need so we can post our picture to the whole world to see, or everyone on this website to see, or that could be copied and pasted somewhere else and spread around. I would say then we would distinguish between that. That would take the same ruling as what we mentioned before on social media. But if there was a particular suitor who wanted to see a photo, then I would say this would be allowed. So if there's a particular person, a particular family, you're keeping it, restricted in a certain context with a trustworthy source. If there's a particular suitor who wants to see a photo, then this would be allowed as long as they did not share with others any Islamic etiquettes of dress code regarding the picture, and also not describing how that woman looks to others, etc., and so on, are observed, then yeah, I would say in this case it's allowed. If you wanted to just post then your information on these websites or these apps, and if someone is interested, then we could take this into a more private conversation with the families, and like I said, then the picture could be shown, then that's another issue. But just posting for everyone to see, I personally would not encourage that, and Allah knows best.
Jazakallah. In terms of it being, it seems like these at least the vast majority of the applications are looks first. Again, it's not necessarily about the opinion, but I guess just speaking about finding then that suitor to be interested in you when you have this attraction first mentality. So it seems like it's more of a root cause issue of how we're finding the spouse, or do you think that the structure just needs to change so that once somebody's interested, then the picture is shared?
No, there's no issue with the issue of looking for the purpose of marriage. I mean, this is a established issue and encouraged matter in the Sharia. That's not the issue. The looks first concept is not a problem, in my opinion. It's now, it's in a structure where it cannot be contained and it cannot be controlled in a proper manner. That's the problem. But looking at a person for marriage, even without them knowing, even some scholars even allowed it with desire. So to the point that even some scholars allow looking for the purpose of marriage, even with desire. There's discussion on that, but the point is there's no issue with that in general. The default is that you should look and you should see if that is someone you're attracted to. But the issue now is the situation at hand is that it's for everyone to see now. It's not a particular person that is interested only and their family members and so on. So that's my issue. It's not the concept of looking. It being a site, a a site first concept of marriage isn't an issue for me, and looking first isn't an issue, and being attracted first and then talking to them about other issues later also isn't an issue. The issue is this environment that it's being done in, and it's uncontained. That's the problem.
Sure. And just I'm sure somebody is going to ask this question or think about this question. The fact that the picture is posted on a matrimonial website, not quote unquote the public, is that enough of a boundary to say that this picture is not being posted for the public, but is being posted for matrimonial purposes?
Like that's the rules of the whatever website.
Yeah.
My personal opinion, as I mentioned before, I still think it's the same. These websites have hundreds, if not thousands, of people signed up for them.
Mm.
A lot of them are fake profiles. As I've said, I've seen people scam people. I've seen fake profiles. I've seen fake pictures, fake conversations. So I don't think it's still within the bounds of posting your picture from even 100 suitors or 200 suitors or 500 suitors. I don't think that's still within the bounds of Sharia. Again, that's my opinion. Other scholars do differ on this. I personally believe if there's someone that you know directly, then you and the family sharing pictures and so on, that's fine. But if you were to have a profile, I would refrain from posting your picture for all 500 people or 1,000 people on the site to see. Your information being placed there hopefully will be enough to draw some attention, and then that could lead to having a seeing of the other and so on. And I think that has worked successfully for many people that I know, especially conservative practicing Muslims who don't want to show their picture, even if they're niqabi, still they don't want to show their picture. And just seeing that someone is like-minded with you on their profile gets you to start a conversation, and that leads to the families getting involved, or pictures being shared, or videos being being set up, or meetings being set up, and it takes off from there. So I hope whoever puts their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whoever has fear of Allah and gives up something for the sake of Allah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, won't let them down. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will find a way, especially if someone really has the intention of trying to find someone in the most halal way possible, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant them success.
Usman, any questions or comments on that?
Yeah. So, barakallahu feek, Sheikh. By the way, when were you in Egypt?
So I'm actually Egyptian by origin, so I was there. Every year I'm back and forth, so I've been there all my life. A few months there, a few months here.
Okay.
But the 4 years of Azhar, I can't even remember the date. It was after I finished my undergrad in 2012.
Okay.
So then I started Azhar for 4 years. But then I was also back and forth because at that time there was the situation over there didn't allow for full.
Okay.
So I was back and forth, but I've been there back and forth my entire life.
Oh, mashallah. Yeah. Okay, I was there in 2007.
I was just there, I think a year ago. Yeah, after Hajj. Last Hajj, I stopped by.
Oh, mashallah. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. My family, Abuha min Misr wa Ummuha min Syria. So, I'm Muslim in Pakistan, but I want to go back to Egypt. I was سكنت في حي العاشر. If you know. Yeah. Anyway, long time ago. Anyway, I think one of the challenges that I've seen, especially with a lot of young men, is they fall into questioning how important are looks, right? And I tell them, look, looks are important because a part of marriage is to protect you from zina. There has to be a baseline physical attraction, right? And so, yes, you want to be attracted, and this goes both ways for both men and women, right? And so that's why I was thinking about, like, okay, is it better to know how the person looks first, or evaluate their other criteria and so on, and then afterwards have that conversation? But what happens when you're in a position where everything matches on paper, and then you see the person's picture, and you're like, oh no, there's really not that attraction. What now, right? Because the conversations have maybe already happened, and one would only conclude that the person is saying no, either on the girl side or the guy side. Once they saw my picture, they'll put two and two together and say that it's my physical appearance that they're not, attracted to. And I would say you have to go in with a healthy self-esteem, right? Because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and there is a whole thing called like social learning theory within physical attractiveness. So just because one person is not attracted to you doesn't mean you're not an attractive person. There are other people who found you very attractive, right? But I think it's kind of a challenging issue, right? Because some people then will shy away, and I've seen extreme situations and where somebody will go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to marry fi sabilillah, and there's just no intimacy afterwards. It's an absolute disaster where they want the spouse to change this. They want the spouse to basically be somebody they're not, like completely, right? I think it's almost getting to the point of like, can you have plastic surgery, right? And so I mean, imagine what that does for a person's self-esteem, self-worth, and so on. And I spoke to young men and women both in this type of situation, and they're like, well, I thought I was doing it fi sabilillah. I thought I was doing it because she was hafidha or he was hafidh, and like I knew that there was zero physical attraction, but I still did it. Like, I think there's a balance here, and so you end up actually hurting somebody severely because you didn't take into account the physical attraction. But then on the flip side, there are people who will only go for the physical attraction, ignore every other criteria, and then once beauty fades, they're like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? So
I think that kind of goes into our next topic, right? Because the next topic is about those conversations that once you find somebody or you're interested in somebody, then that goes into these private conversations and these DMs. And I think, there's really two issues. One is how quickly should we get somebody involved, right? Number one, to save you from that issue. Let's say there's no pictures posted, you're interested, then how quickly should somebody get involved? Number one. And number two is that, there's obviously an issue of talking in private in these online applications where there's no third party. So Sheikh, maybe you can give us some insight in terms of at what point should we ask for the picture, or what point should we get a third party involved in these discussions once you find somebody online or through these applications?
Well, no doubt I agree with Dr. Usman about the self-esteem issue of if you like her religion first and then you find out that maybe her appearance is not what you're looking for and so on. No doubt the ideal situation is come from imams of the Salaf that you ask about her looks first, because if you asked about her religion and the news came back that it's good, and then you said no because her looks, it's a problem. So no doubt the ideal situation is that you would look, and like I said, you can even look without her permission. So the issue is ideal situation, that would be the case. But the problem is we're now in a situation, in my opinion, in that situation, that it doesn't afford us that, unfortunately, because I cannot justify that and then posting the picture, trying to find the ideal order of things. I can't justify, for the sake of that, to post a picture for hundreds or thousands of people to see. Again, that's my personal opinion. But I no doubt I agree with you. Ideally, you would know, you would do it in a way where no one's feelings are hurt, so that you would know what she looks like and you got the relevant information. And that way there's a higher chance of, things working out when you actually do speak and no one gets hurt. That no doubt is the ideal situation. Whether we look at the sunnah of the Prophet when he advising the companions and how they, went about it and looking first and so on. And some of the imams saying that you should look at, her beauty first and so on, ask about her beauty first before her religion. That no doubt is the ideal situation, as you mentioned, just, for the reasons that you brought up. But again, unfortunately, this is a whole other situation. I can't justify showing it to everyone for the sake of the ideal situation. We're going to have to work with what we have. And that doesn't mean we have to delay the pictures very late. I'm just saying, just having a general idea of if you're compatible and you're interested in your message, and that it becomes a more controlled environment, then you can introduce, having a video chat or something with, families involved and things like that. That can occur right away. It doesn't have to you don't have to speak for a long time and then you finally reveal what you look like. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we're trying to find the best situation in that type of environment.
Right,
and I don't. If Sheikh Joe is here, I don't want to speak in his presence. If he's here, and if we only have a few minutes left for the program, maybe he can.
I don't want to say I was purposely late, but I wasn't. But alhamdulillah, I'm kind of glad that I was, because Sheikh Ahmed will go into considerable detail that's necessary, and I benefited a lot. Alhamdulillah. Also, I apologize for my tardiness. I teach Usul Iman on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we generally end in time for me to hop on. But because it's an on-site class, I had a bit of a drive, so I apologize for the tardiness.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Joe, for joining, and nice to see you again. Alhamdulillah, we were able to meet up in Chicago. That was very awesome. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. So, Sheikh Joe, so we were just asking Sheikh Ahmed about, we talked about pictures and Sheikh's perspective on that, but then we started to talk about the communication aspect of these applications, right? That as soon as you swipe right and there's a match, typically what happens is that there's some direct messaging that's happening. And so, I wanted to ask Sheikh, in terms of your thoughts or the issues surrounding these conversations, and at what point should a third party be brought into that conversation?
So I think having a third party is necessary from the beginning. And even, regardless of the age of the people involved. Now, the older that the people are, they might have a bit more professional experience in life, to where they are a bit more, let's say, guarded or controlled with their communication. But I think it's absolutely necessary for there to be knowledge of what's going on with this regard, in both the man and the woman's life, right? Family members, wali involved, brother and sister, parent. This does not mean that they're necessarily chaperoning every single communication, right? But somebody needs to know what you're up to, because number one, I think that subconsciously actually puts in the mind of the person, like, oh, this person's not just talking to me and nobody knows about me. This person is talking to me and somebody else knows about me as well, right? So I can tell you, for men, that will definitely make them more particular about how they're going to talk and how free that they talk, because they'll feel a sense of accountability. And for women as well, right? So I think having them involved and I think a lot of from what I was listening to on the way home, a lot of what you guys were talking about was about apps, right?
Yes.
But I feel that a lot of people are like, even studies have shown that even in non-Muslim circles, the use of apps has gone down. Kind of the thrill is gone, and people are looking for real connection. So ways to actually meet in person have become more preferred by people. Even with that, like, think of what did people do before these apps? They were speaking to real people, asking for real connections. And if it was electronically, then maybe it was that they met over Zoom, right? Maybe it was that they that they emailed each other. And I think going low tech and going old tech is probably one of the ways to keep some of those controls in place, like Sheikh Ahmed was referring to stop things from getting out of hand. Because there's obviously a problem with digital footprint and the abuse of digital footprint. And let's face it, the digital footprint of women is abused much more than it is of men. And we've seen that time and time again, of people who they'll even kind of collect pictures of Muslim women online and post them to Reddit and things like that. So there's a huge problem with that, right? Now it's I think it can only be taken, or only be controlled by going a little bit low tech and slowing down, actually. Because one of the things, I think, Naveed, you and I in Usman spoke about this before, is that one of the things that the apps does is that it is the paradox of choice actually makes people think that they're making good choices. And so they're very quick to reject people for maybe not appearing the way that they expected to them, or not, or having all of the information that they think they're supposed to know up front. And then no, that's not what I'm looking for. They reject, and then that person could have actually been a very good, viable candidate for them. but they didn't actually have a human experience with them. They had a digitally filtered one, and it led to problems.
And I know that Sheikh Ahmed has to leave in about 6 minutes. And so maybe I could just ask one last question to our Sheikh before you need to hop off. Obviously, feel free whenever you need to leave to hop off. But what role does khalwa play in these communications or these chat rooms or these DMs?
Well, obviously, with modern technology, we're able to, find ourselves in a virtual space with someone from the opposite gender, and the nature of social media, marriage websites, and so on, obviously can lead to secluded forms of communication, whether it's written communication, verbal, video, pictures, and a man and a woman could be alone together. No one else can know what they're saying. So obviously, you're right to ask about this concept of khalwa or seclusion, and we all know that the default for physical presence, a man and a woman shouldn't be alone together, right? But does that apply to being alone in a virtual space? This first has to, first we have to kind of discuss the concept of khalwa. That if we look at the definitions of the scholars of khalwa, obviously this is classical, and they didn't have virtual chat rooms before. But a man being alone with a strange woman or a foreign woman in a place where no one else sees them, we know that this is impermissible in general. There are some cases of exceptions and discussions, but in general, we know that's impermissible. And khalwa is of types. We have legislated and not legislated, and that which is legislated is further divided into valid and invalid. I don't want to get into all of that, but what I do want to emphasize, what I alluded to before, is the prohibition of khalwa is one of means. Remember when I said the prohibition of looking at the other, right? Obviously, we're not talking about for marriage, but the concept of lowering the gaze, the concept of not being alone with someone. This prohibition is one of means. The prohibition of zina or adultery and fornication is an end purpose and goal that the Sharia aims to achieve. So we have means and we have end goals. So prohibition of seclusion is from the means to achieve that end. The Sharia came and blocked these means to make sure we don't get to that end result. Now, means are of levels. We have those which are close to the ends, so they're given their ruling. And then we have those which are far away from the ends, so they're not giving their ruling. And then we have cases in between or a gray area, and this is where scholars end up differing. So the Sharia prohibited seclusion between the genders as a form of blocking the means, and the context and place of zina was given the same ruling, of the prohibition, just like zina. So you're not actually committing zina, but being alone together in a place without anyone else, that is the mudhinna, right, as they say, or the place and context where zina could take place. And so it's as a means to it. This is where zina could take place, so it's given the ruling of prohibition like zina. So that's the general concept of seclusion, right? And now the scholars differed when it comes to how much of sadd al-dhara'i', how much of blocking the means they take. We don't have time to get into that. But if we look at when they lift those issues that could lead to the haram, especially when it comes to fitna, they allow it when there is a preponderant benefit, like I said before. So that which is prohibited due to blocking the means is made permissible due to a need and preponderant benefit which outweighs that harm. And the reason I mention this is because now we're going to get to the concept of speaking with the other gender is going to be a need that we need to have to find marriage. So as opposed to picture making, adding pictures, I did not feel that adding a picture is a need or a preponderant benefit that outweighs the harm in that situation. As for speaking with someone, so here we're going to go with that which is prohibited due to blocking the means is made permissible due to a need and preponderant benefit that outweighs that harm. Now, scholars may differ on the application on this, but what I'm going to say is the default for that which is a reason for fitna, like being alone or looking and so on, the default for that which, is a reason for fitna, and we block it generally due to blocking the means, if it is opposed by that which is preponderant, it becomes allowed. And that's why it's legislated for one to look at a woman due to the need of marriage, for the purpose of marriage. And like I said, some scholars even allow looking even with desire. Now, looking at the concept of khalwa, classically, and forgive me if I'm going on too long, but it all kind of ties together. We're looking at kind of legal precedent on this issue and then applying it to the modern issue. Some jurists said that khalwa is lifted with a barrier. So, such as like if we're in a place in two separate rooms in a house with just one door. Some scholars say that's enough. You're in a house, there's one door, there's a barrier, and that they said is enough to lift khalwa. And this is similar to discussing the issue of discussing over the phone or social media, where they are physically separated, and it's possible for the communication to lead them to meet. Just like it's possible you're physically separated in a house with one door, but it's possible for them to meet. That is close to the concept of social media and apps and the phone. So that would be kind of if it's allowed for some scholars with a barrier that khalwa was lifted here, then it'd be even more deserving of being lifted when you're farther apart online. Now, similar to this, some jurists allowed, if we have a couple who are irrevocably divorced, and I don't have to explain this because you're a divorce attorney, right? So I don't have to go through those concepts, and we don't have the time. But some jurists talked about allowing a couple who are irrevocably divorced to sleep in the same place if there's a barrier between them, if the man is not an evil person. While other scholars said that no, the barrier is not enough. And they also, for example, they said no, it's not enough. And then some scholars discussed if a man separated from his wife, yet he still has to fulfill the dowry, and the dowry is teaching her Quran, can he teach her Quran alone from behind a veil or not? So again, they discussed very similar situations. And an important factor they noticed here is that some scholars mentioned that previous emotional attachment is a threat for leading to the haram, and they would then take that into consideration for the ruling. And this is something that we should also take in consideration when talking to someone of the opposite gender on a social media platform. So anyway, these are just some examples where some scholars considered similar scenarios to be considered, no, there's no longer khalwa, or no, it's not enough, there's still khalwa. But the general rule is jurists were cautious regarding speaking to the opposite gender. Even when it came to giving and returning the salam, and responding even to someone who sneezed and responding back from opposite genders, and even sending a messenger to give one salam to someone from the opposite gender. Again, they discussed is this allowed or not, and they were cautious. So with that kind of introduction from our classical fiqh perspective, I would say speaking over the internet is not considered khalwa in the classical sense where the rulings would be applicable. Like if you're alone together, the issue of, when it comes to marriage and dowry and so on and so forth, and divorce, the rulings that, I'm sure you guys covered in previous sessions. Being alone together over the internet is not considered khalwa according to the classical definitions that we alluded to. And speaking between the two genders without a need is something scholars were wary about. But here, I believe, as we mentioned before, there's a preponderant need and benefit in this situation, and that is given precedence over that which may lead to the impermissible. So I believe it would be allowed for a man and woman to speak over the phone or the marriage app or the marriage website, whatever, in order to get married, as long as the known Islamic etiquettes of gender interaction are observed. And now we do take in consideration what some scholars mentioned. If speaking leads to emotional or physical attachment that brings with it fear of improper interaction taking place and so on, then the ruling would change. What I'm saying now would change. But if that's not the case, I believe it's okay. And again, this would be considered a far means and not a closer means. And so I believe, and there are levels in between. I hope that this is far enough means, and at the same time, there's a preponderant benefit that would supersede and override the harm that could be that could occur. And so, inshallah, I hope it would be allowed. And especially with some cases that are even more dangerous that some scholars consider to be a lifting of the khalwa, like we said before. This should be more deserving of being flexible here, and Allah knows best. So the ruling may change based on the situation. When there's a higher chance, again, when the means gets closer to the ends or farther away, the ruling may change. When there's a higher chance of it leading to the impermissible, then the scholars were stricter and we should be stricter. And when there's less likely of a chance, then they're more flexible and we should be flexible. And so the scenario may be haram at one time, or it could be even disliked at another time. The ruling may change. So speaking, forgive me, I'm 3 minutes over the time, but speaking over the internet, I believe is a farther means than looking. And looking, the latter was allowed due to needs and benefits in the divine law, then speaking should also be allowed, inshallah, in this case. So speaking over the internet would be allowed as long as the need and preponderant benefit outweighs the harm. But as Sheikh Joe mentioned, we should try to get the third party in as right from the get-go, and that's necessary to avoid any sort of controversy and risk. But if anything changes, then the ruling would change. And if they cannot be alone at all in the conversation, and if your wali, for example, your family, your guardian knows who you're speaking to and can read these conversations, then that is alhamdulillah nur ala nur. And the farther stay away from doubtful matters and prohibition, the better, alhamdulillah. So inshallah, in summary, I believe it's okay, but with the private etiquette and restrictions mentioned, and if we can bring a third party in right away, as Sheikh Joe mentioned, that is ideal and best.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah. Such a beautiful legal reasoning. Us U.S. lawyers can only dream of being, that legally sophisticated in terms of coming up, and stating an argument such as that. MashaAllah, no, Jazakallah khair. That's really clear, very, all the different sides. I think, MashaAllah, that really does hit it, and I think it's very important, as you mentioned, Sheikh, what Sheikh Joe Bradford was saying as well, that okay, maybe it's not khalwa, but you still should bring in the third party as soon as possible. So I think that balance or that approach is very, very clear. I really appreciate that. Jazakallah. Sheikh, again, feel free to drop off whenever you'd like to. I don't want to hold you up.
No, I'm gonna sign off now. I have to leave at 8, so please forgive me. But I'm just tayammum. The water arrived. It arrived late, but the water arrived. So inshallah, we can't have tayammum when the water is here. So I'll sign off, and Sheikh Joe will be much better than me. Alhamdulillah. Allah yabarak
fiik. Beautiful to meet you. Keeping your du'as, inshallah.
Much appreciated.
Jazakallah. MashaAllah. No, first time I'm meeting Sheikh Ahmed, so it was beautiful.
Yeah, he's the gem of the West Coast. I don't think enough people know about him, and his attention to detail and thoroughness is always something that I envy.
It makes you appreciate our sharia so much.
Exactly.
And so on, right? Because so I love the analogy, right? Like you have to make a legal precedent in your field.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to go through different clauses and rulings and
yeah.
And subhanallah, it makes you think twice before just opening your mouth without knowledge, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Just giving a black and white answer. This is haram. This is halal. And subhanallah, seeing like a sheikh who's been trained in that background to present it in that fashion. I actually would love for more shuyukh to. I guess maybe because I have a legal mind, that's why I really appreciate it. But it was beautiful.
Just to learn how you drive. Answer then you'd step back and you appreciate it and you're like, oh my god, I probably shouldn't jump to this is why isn't this permissible, or my feeling is saying that this is permissible. It's like Sheikh Joe, to your point about trying to get others involved as soon as possible, the wali and so on, like from a psychological standpoint, what I've seen is that I feel like it shows more seriousness, especially at a time when people want commitment, people want a serious connection, and people are scared of others wasting their time. I think involving somebody right off the bat, with my own case personally, Allah bless her, my mother-in-law showed up literally on camera at the first talk, right when I said salam to my spouse. Now my mother-in-law was in the back like, hello, assalamu alaikum. But it gave me the message that wow, they're not playing around.
Yeah,
they're serious about this, because I had been in situations previously where things were unnecessarily dragged on. Like it doesn't just happen from the girl side, the guy side, it happens from the girl side as well sometimes, where they're just looking for companionship and are not serious and actually haven't told the family and haven't really thought this whole thing through, right? And so it provides a certain sense of security that okay, your intention truly is marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that being clear with one's intention from the beginning is the best safeguard, because as you said, there's a lot of people who will think it's not that big of a deal, right? And then when problems happen, then it's why didn't no one tell me? Why didn't I know? Things like that. So as clear as you can be with your intention from the beginning, I think that it's better. And I also think that it's that it cuts off a lot of the kind of romanticizing that happens with how these things are supposed to happen, and preserves the dignity of both partners as well. So that's very important.
I know we usually end by 10, but Sheikh, if it's okay with you, maybe we can spend another 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, let's cut it short because it is late for me as well.
Sure.
Unless, is there a couple more questions that you have that you wanted to
No,
go?
I mean, I think it would kind of change the topics, and maybe what we could do is keep these questions about like online nikahs and email divorces and those types of things maybe for a different session. So I think it might make sense to end it about here, unless there's any other comments by Usman or Sheikh Joe as it relates to marriage apps, private convos, and just kind of the impact of technology on us finding our spouses in this day and age.
I think the only thing that I would just reiterate is the necessity of real human connection, right? And I think a lot of times the apps are a stand-in for our own insecurities. We don't want to tell other people that we're actually looking to get married, and therefore we shy away from saying that, thinking that, oh, well, there's an app that I can go to, so I don't have to tell anybody. I might find somebody, then I'll just show up magically with a wife or a husband, and everything is good. And in reality, that becomes an issue, right? Because not only can you fall into the haram, as Sheikh Ahmed was alluding to, right? But you can do a lot to damage your own mental peace and your own dignity by no one really knowing, right? And we're not saying tell the whole world or that people have to necessarily be watching your every move, but there's something about human connection that regulates the psyche, I think, and Usman can talk more to that, but I think that's one of the reasons why we have these things, that even for somebody that, for example, accepts Islam, right, and maybe doesn't have family members to step in for them like that, they're still expected to have somebody in the community who kind of knows what's going on, and that they can act as a sounding board for, to be able to help them and guide them and quite frankly protect them at times.
Yeah.
Jazakallah.
There's a reason why like online gaming competitions and so on, right? They're actually in person in conference and not streamed online, right? People actually get together and there's like a whole audience and so on for esports, right? Because there is something about seeing people in person. I've also found, and I'll end with this. I don't know, Sheikh Joe, if you've seen this or Naveed, you've seen this, but sometimes when you ask people how they met, and this, I don't think this should be the case, but sometimes there's almost this embarrassment if it's an app versus like, oh, the imam knew us and we both used to volunteer at the masjid, and like,
Yeah.
this seems like a cooler story, right? Then, oh yeah, we met on Mazmatch, so
yeah.
Well,
there's that whole joke about people that are on those apps that will say, we'll tell our parents we met at the masjid.
Yeah, right. I see that. They have a billboard saying that, by the way.
Oh, really?
They have a billboard that says that.
Yeah, we've got one of those billboards here in town, and man, it's cringe. So
that's
you can only imagine that.
Yeah.
The advertisements you guys get in your area.
Subhanallah. Jazakumullahu khairan to all of our listeners and to both of you, mashallah. Month in, month out, alhamdulillah, you guys take out your time to help me, help the community, talk about these different issues of marriage. Inshallah, what we'll do is maybe in the next session or the session after that, we'll pick up again on this question of technology and marriage and the impact that technology has on marriage. But I think, alhamdulillah, there was a lot to chew on already, right? In terms of the apps and the different ways that we need to navigate them, taking into consideration what our tradition and what our faith teaches us. So alhamdulillah, I'm very grateful for that. And so with that, alhamdulillah, it's late here, 10:13 p.m. I'm sure it's late for Sheikh Joe as well as for Usman. So I think we will conclude here. Again, jazakumullahu khairan. And keep me in your du'as and keep us all in your du'as, inshallah.
Do the same. Jazakallah khairan, Naveed. Thank you so much. And Usman, always great seeing you. May Allah bless you guys for your efforts. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.